When Sophia's car breaks down in a storm with her baby in her arms, she finds unexpected shelter at a stranger's farm. But can this quiet man protect her from a past that's catching up fast? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The storm clouds darkened the sky as Sofia Alvarez clutched her 6-month-old daughter Emmy tighter against her chest. The baby whimpered, sensing her mother's fear. Sofia's old car had broken down 3 miles back, and she'd been walking ever since, the diaper bag hanging heavy on her shoulder. "It's okay, baby girl," Sofia whispered, though her own voice trembled. "We'll find somewhere soon." Rain began to fall, first as light drops, then in heavy sheets that soaked through Sofia's thin jacket. Ahead, through the curtain of water, she spotted a weathered sign: Willow Creek Farm. Beyond it stood a large farmhouse with a red barn nearby. Light glowed from the windows, warm and inviting. Sofia hesitated, remembering the last time she'd asked for help and how that had turned out. But Emmy gave a small cry, and Sofia knew she had no choice. She stumbled up the gravel driveway, her shoes squelching with water. By the time she reached the porch, both she and the baby were drenched. Sofia knocked on the door, her hand shaking from cold and fear. The door swung open, revealing a tall man with broad shoulders. He wore a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up, showing strong forearms. His face was handsome but serious, with eyes that seemed to hold something heavy behind them. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. "I'm sorry to bother you," Sofia said, water dripping from her dark hair. "My car broke down on the road. We just need a place to stay for the night. I can pay." She fumbled for her wallet, though she knew it held barely $20. "We can sleep anywhere. The barn even, just somewhere dry." The man looked at her for a long moment, then at the bundle in her arms where Emmy's tiny face peeked out. His expression softened slightly. "The barn's warm," he said simply. "Go on in. I'll bring towels." Relief washed over Sofia. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "I'm Caleb," he said. "Caleb Morgan. Sofia Alvarez. And this is Emmy." Caleb nodded, then gestured toward the barn. "There's a small room inside with a cot. Used to be where the farmhand stayed. It's clean." Sofia hurried through the rain to the barn. Inside it was surprisingly warm and smelled of hay and animals. A few horses nickered softly from their stalls. She found the room Caleb mentioned, small but tidy, with a narrow bed and a small table with a lamp. She had just laid Emmy down when Caleb appeared with an armful of towels, a flannel shirt and sweatpants. "These might be big on you, but they're dry," he said, placing them on the bed. "There's a bathroom through that door. I'll bring some food." Before Sofia could thank him again, he was gone. She quickly dried herself and Emmy, changing the baby into the only dry clothes she had left in the diaper bag. The sweatpants were huge on her small frame, but as Caleb had promised, they were warm and dry. When Caleb returned, he carried a tray with soup, bread, and a bottle of warm milk. He set it down without a word and turned to leave. "You don't have to go," Sofia said, surprising herself. "I mean, it's your barn, and I haven't properly thanked you." Caleb paused at the door. "No need for thanks. Storm's getting worse. You're welcome to stay until it passes." Later that night, after Sofia had eaten and fed Emmy, the baby began to cry. Sofia walked her back and forth in the small room, bouncing her gently, but nothing seemed to help. Emmy's face was red with effort, her tiny fists balled tight. "Shh, baby, please," Sofia begged, exhaustion making her voice crack. "What's wrong?" A soft knock came at the door, and Caleb's concerned face appeared. "Everything okay?" Sofia felt tears of frustration welling up. "She won't stop crying. I've tried everything. She's not wet. She's been fed." Her voice trailed off as a sob threatened to escape. Caleb took a step forward hesitantly. "May I?" he asked, holding out his arms. Sofia blinked in surprise but handed Emmy over. To her amazement, Caleb held the baby with practiced ease, cradling her against his chest. He began to hum softly, a low, gentle tune that seemed to fill the small room. Gradually, Emmy's cries subsided. "How did you do that?" Sofia asked, watching in wonder. A shadow passed over Caleb's face. "Had some practice," he said simply, not elaborating. He looked down at Emmy, then back at Sofia. taking in her exhausted face and the dark circles under her eyes. "You need rest," he said. Then, in a softer voice, he added words that would echo in Sophia's mind for days to come. "Let me take care of you." Not just to the baby, but to her too. Sophia wanted to protest, to say she could manage on her own. She'd been doing it for months now. But the kindness in this stranger's eyes broke something inside her. She nodded, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "Just for a little while," she whispered. Caleb sat in the room's only chair, still holding Emmy, who had fallen into a peaceful sleep against his chest. "Get some rest," he said. "I'll watch over her." Sophia lay down, intending only to close her eyes for a moment. But exhaustion pulled her under, and she slept deeply for the first time in months. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the small window. Emmy was beside her on the bed, sleeping peacefully. A bottle of milk sat on the table, along with a note. "Breakfast in the house when you're ready." Sophia stared at the note, conflicting emotions swirling inside her. She'd only planned to stay one night, to pass through this town like all the others before it. She was running, after all, from Mark, from his coldness, from the promises he'd broken the moment Emmy was born. "We'll leave after breakfast," she told the sleeping Emmy. "We can't stay. We can't rely on anyone again." But as she gathered their few belongings, Sophia couldn't help wondering about the quiet farmer with the gentle hands who could soothe her baby when she couldn't. The farmhouse kitchen was warm and smelled of coffee and bacon. Caleb stood at the stove, his back to her. He turned when she entered, nodding a greeting. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Better than I have in months," Sophia admitted. "Thank you for everything. But we should be going." Caleb set a plate of eggs and bacon on the table. "Car's still broken down," he said. "I checked this morning. Needs a new battery, at least." Sophia's heart sank. "I can't afford repairs right now," she said, her voice small. "Got a friend who owns the garage in town," Caleb replied. "He owes me a favor, but he can't get to it until tomorrow." Sophia bit her lip. "We can't impose—" "Not imposing," Caleb cut in. "Barn's just sitting there, and Emmy seems to like it here." As if on cue, Emmy gave a happy gurgle from Sophia's arms. Despite herself, Sophia smiled. "One more night," she conceded, "but I'll work for our keep. I noticed your garden needs weeding, and I'm good with cooking." Caleb nodded. "Fair enough." After breakfast, Sophia put Emmy down for a nap in the barn and then set to work in Caleb's vegetable garden. The sun was warm on her back as she pulled weeds from between rows of tomatoes and peppers. From time to time, she glanced toward the field where Caleb was mending a fence, his movements strong and sure. There was something about him that intrigued her. He was different from Mark, who had been all charm and smooth words. Caleb was quiet. His kindness shone through actions rather than promises. When Emmy woke, Sophia brought her outside, laying a blanket under the shade of an apple tree. To her surprise, Caleb joined them during his break, sitting cross-legged on the blanket and letting Emmy grab his finger with her tiny hand. "You're good with her," Sophia observed. Caleb's face clouded slightly. "Always wanted kids," he said after a moment. "You live here alone?" Sophia asked, then immediately regretted the question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." "It's okay," he said. "Yes, just me, since my father passed 3 years ago." "I'm sorry for your loss." Caleb nodded his thanks. "Farm's been in the family for generations. Dad expected me to marry and have a family to carry on the tradition. Things didn't work out that way." Sophia wanted to ask more, but sensed his reluctance. Instead, she said, "Emmy and I are alone too. Her father, he wasn't ready for a family." "His loss," Caleb said simply, looking at Emmy with genuine warmth in his eyes. That evening, Sophia cooked dinner using vegetables from the garden. They ate together at the kitchen table, the conversation flowing more easily than Sophia expected. Caleb wasn't a man of many words, but when he did speak, he was thoughtful. After dinner, as Sophia washed the dishes, she asked, "How did you learn to care for babies? You're surprisingly good at it." Caleb was quiet for so long that Sophia thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "There was someone, Sarah, we were engaged." "What happened?" Sophia asked softly. She was pregnant, Caleb said, his voice tight. We were so happy. I read every baby book I could find, but there were complications. We lost the baby. And then I lost her too. Sophia's heart ached for him. I'm so sorry, Caleb. He shook his head as if shaking off the memories. It was 5 years ago. That kind of pain doesn't just disappear with time, Sophia said gently. Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. No, he agreed. It doesn't. Later, as Sophia settled into the cot with Emmy, she thought about Caleb's story. His loss explained so much. The sadness in his eyes, his gentleness with Emmy, the empty, well-kept farmhouse that seemed to be waiting for a family. The next morning, Sophia woke to find a package of diapers outside the barn door, the exact brand and size Emmy used. Next to it was a bag with baby food and new bottles. When she questioned Caleb about it, he simply shrugged. Noticed you were running low. Went to the store this morning. You shouldn't have, Sophia began. Wanted to, Caleb interrupted. Besides, someone like you shouldn't have to worry about such things. Someone like me, Sophia asked, suddenly defensive. Someone who's been through enough already, Caleb clarified, his eyes kind. Sophia felt her defenses crumble. It had been so long since anyone had simply tried to make things easier for her without expecting anything in return. By the afternoon, Caleb's friend had come to look at Sophia's car. The news wasn't good. Batteries dead, alternators shot, and there's a problem with the transmission, the mechanic explained. It'll take at least a week to get the parts and the labor won't be cheap. Sophia's heart sank. She didn't have the money for major repairs, and she couldn't stay at Willow Creek Farm indefinitely. Fix it, Caleb told his friend. Send me the bill. Caleb, no, Sophia protested once the mechanic had left. I can't let you do that. Consider it a loan, Caleb said. You can pay me back when you're able. Why are you helping us like this? Sophia asked, genuinely confused. You don't even know us. Caleb was quiet for a moment, then said, Everyone needs help sometimes. I've been alone a long time. It's nice having you and Emmy here. That night, as a gentle rain fell outside, Sophia sat in the kitchen with Caleb after Emmy had fallen asleep. They shared a pot of tea, talking about everything and nothing. Where will you go? Caleb asked eventually. When the car's fixed, Sophia traced the rim of her mug with her finger. I don't know, she admitted. I've been driving for months, never staying anywhere too long. Running from something? Caleb asked, then quickly added, You don't have to tell me. Sophia took a deep breath. Emmy's father, Mark. We were together for 3 years. He promised me the world. Marriage, a house, a family. Then I got pregnant and everything changed. He became cold, distant, said he wasn't ready to be a father. By the time Emmy was born, he was barely home. When she was 2 months old, I found out he was seeing someone else. I'm sorry, Caleb said, his eyes full of genuine empathy. The worst part is he doesn't even want Emmy, but he threatened to fight for custody just to hurt me. Said his family has money, connections, that I'd never win. Sophia's voice broke. So I took Emmy and left. I've been moving from town to town ever since, afraid he'll find us. Caleb's expression hardened. No one should be able to threaten a mother with taking her child. I don't even know if he's really looking for us, Sophia confessed. Maybe I'm running from nothing, but I can't risk Emmy. You're doing what any good mother would do, Caleb assured her. Protecting your child. As the days passed, Sophia and Emmy fell into a routine at Willow Creek Farm. Sophia helped with chores, cooking, cleaning, even learning to collect eggs from the chickens. Caleb showed her how to milk the cow, laughing gently at her first awkward attempts. They spent evenings on the porch, watching the sunset while Emmy played on a blanket at their feet. Sometimes they talked, but often they sat in comfortable silence. One evening, about a week after her arrival, Sophia realized with a start that she felt safe here. For the first time in months, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, wasn't planning her next move. Penny for your thoughts, Caleb said, noticing her thoughtful expression. I was just thinking that it's nice here, Sophia replied. Peaceful. It is, Caleb agreed. Lonely sometimes, but peaceful. Do you ever think of selling? Sophia asked. Moving somewhere with more people around. Caleb shook his head. This land is in my blood. Morgan men have been farming it for generations. He paused, then added softly, always thought I'd have a son to pass it on to someday. Sophia felt a pang in her heart for the family Caleb had lost the chance to have, for the man who so clearly had love to give, but no one to give it to. Emmy chose that moment to roll over, a new skill she'd just mastered. She looked up at Caleb with a gummy smile that lit up her whole face. She likes you, Sophia said, watching the way Caleb's eyes softened when he looked at the baby. Feelings mutual, Caleb replied, gently tickling Emmy's tummy. That night, as Sophia put Emmy to bed in the barn room that now felt almost like home, she found herself not wanting to leave in the morning, even though the mechanic had called to say her car would be ready. What are we doing, Emmy? She whispered to her sleeping daughter. We can't stay, we always knew that. But as she watched Emmy's peaceful face in sleep, Sophia wondered if maybe, just maybe, they had found somewhere they could belong. Someone who might care for them both. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, because love had cost her before, and she wasn't sure her heart could survive being broken again. Meanwhile, in a town 200 miles away, Mark Alvarez stared at his phone. The private investigator had finally texted him an update. Possible sighting of Sophia and the baby. Small town called Willow Creek, staying at a farm outside of town. Will confirm and send details. Mark smiled coldly. Found you, he whispered. The morning sun streamed through the small window of the barn room, waking Sophia from a peaceful sleep. Emmy was already awake, babbling happily to herself in the makeshift crib Caleb had built, a wooden box lined with soft blankets. Today's the day, baby girl, Sophia said, lifting Emmy into her arms. The car will be ready. But her voice lacked conviction. The truth was, she didn't want to leave Willow Creek Farm. In just over a week, this place had started to feel like home. And Caleb, Sophia sighed. Caleb Morgan had shown her more kindness in a few days than Mark had in their entire relationship. He never raised his voice, never made her feel like a burden. Instead, he made her feel valued, capable, even special. After dressing Emmy in one of the new outfits Caleb had brought home from town, saw it in the window, thought it might fit her, Sophia headed to the farmhouse. She found Caleb at the kitchen table, newspaper spread out before him, a mug of coffee in his hand. Morning, he said, looking up with that half smile that made her heart skip. There's coffee, and I made pancakes. You didn't have to do that, Sophia said, settling Emmy in the high chair Caleb had pulled down from the attic, another relic from the family he'd hoped to have with Sarah. Wanted to, Caleb replied, the phrase he often used when she protested his generosity. Big day. Car's ready. Sophia busied herself fixing a bottle for Emmy to avoid meeting his eyes. Yes, Jim called yesterday, said we could pick it up this morning. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Finally, Caleb cleared his throat. You know, he said, his voice careful, measured, there's no rush. For you to leave, I mean. Sophia looked up, hope fluttering in her chest. What do you mean? Caleb shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with expressing his feelings. Just that you and Emmy could stay longer if you wanted to. We've imposed enough, Sophia began. It's not an imposition, Caleb interrupted. Like having you here, both of you. The simple admission hung in the air between them. Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. I like being here too, she whispered. Caleb's face softened. Then stay, at least until you figure out where you're going next. Before Sophia could respond, Emmy let out a string of happy babbles, reaching her arms toward Caleb. Without hesitation, he stood and lifted her from the high chair, settling her comfortably against his shoulder. See? Emmy wants to stay too, he said, the corner of his mouth lifting in a rare full smile. And just like that, the decision was made. A few more days, Sophia agreed, until I figure things out. Caleb nodded, but the look in his eyes told her he hoped those few days might stretch into something more permanent. After breakfast, they drove into town together to pick up Sophia's car. Willow Creek was small, just a main street lined with shops, a diner, a church, and the garage where Jim had been fixing her car. Good as new, Jim said, handing Sophia the keys. Or as good as it's going to get, anyway. Caleb took care of the bill. Sophia shot Caleb a look. They'd agreed she would pay him back in installments. We had a deal, she reminded him when Jim was out of earshot. Still do, Caleb assured her, but no rush. On the drive back to the farm, Sophia followed behind Caleb's truck, Emmy secured in her car seat. It felt strange to be behind the wheel of her own car again. For days she'd been driven around by Caleb, or walked the short distances on the farm. Back at Willow Creek Farm, Sophia parked her car beside the barn. She sat there for a moment, keys in hand, suddenly aware that with the car fixed, nothing was keeping her here except her own choice, and that was terrifying, because staying meant opening herself up to the possibility of more pain, more betrayal. It meant trusting again, and Sophia wasn't sure she remembered how. That evening, after Emmy was asleep, Sophia joined Caleb on the porch swing. The night was warm, fireflies blinking in the gathering darkness. From somewhere in the distance came the soft hooting of an owl. "I've been thinking," Caleb said after they'd been swinging in silence for a while. "Town's having a fair this weekend. Thought you and Emmy might like to go." Sophia smiled. "I'd like that. Emmy too, I'm sure." "Good," Caleb said, looking pleased. "It's nothing fancy. Just rides, games, food stands, but it's tradition around here." "Sounds perfect," Sophia replied. "I haven't been to a fair since I was a kid." Caleb hesitated, then asked, "Would you mind if people thought, if they assumed that we're together?" Sophia finished for him, her heart suddenly racing. Caleb nodded, looking almost shy. Small town. People talk. Might be easier. "I don't mind," Sophia said softly. "If you don't." Their eyes met in the dim light of the porch, and Sophia felt something shift between them. Something new and fragile and full of possibility. The next few days passed in a blur of farm chores and preparations for the fair. Sophia noticed that Caleb seemed lighter somehow, his smiles coming more frequently. He even laughed out loud when Emmy grabbed his nose during dinner one night. The sound of his laughter made Sophia's chest tighten with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for the Willow Creek Fair. Sophia dressed Emmy in a pretty yellow sundress, another of Caleb's spontaneous gifts. For herself, she chose a simple blue dress she'd found at the town's small thrift store. When she emerged from the barn room, Caleb was waiting by his truck. He wore clean jeans and a button-up shirt she hadn't seen before. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her. "You look nice," he said, the simple compliment making her cheeks warm. "So do you," she replied, noticing how the blue of his shirt matched his eyes. The fairgrounds were set up in a large field on the edge of town. Colorful tents and booths lined makeshift streets, and the air smelled of popcorn, cotton candy, and grilling meat. A small Ferris wheel turned lazily against the blue sky, and children darted between attractions, their excited voices rising above the general hum of the crowd. Sophia felt a momentary panic as they entered the busy fairground. She'd been living in such isolation, first on the road and then at the farm, that the crowd felt overwhelming. But then Caleb's hand found the small of her back, steady and reassuring. "Okay?" he asked, his eyes concerned. She nodded, grateful for his understanding. They hadn't gone far when an older woman approached, her face lighting up at the sight of Caleb. "Caleb Morgan, don't tell me you finally left that farm of yours to join the living." Caleb smiled. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson, good to see you." Mrs. Peterson's curious gaze shifted to Sophia and Emmy. "And who do we have here?" "This is Sophia and her daughter Emmy," Caleb said. "They're staying at the farm for a while." "Is that so?" Mrs. Peterson's eyes sparkled with interest. "Well, isn't that nice, and what a beautiful baby, may I?" She reached out her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Sophia allowed her to hold Emmy. The older woman cooed and fussed over the baby, who beamed in response. "She's got her daddy's eyes, doesn't she?" Mrs. Peterson said, glancing between Caleb and Emmy. Sophia froze, not knowing how to respond, but Caleb simply smiled and said, "She's her own person, I think." The answer seemed to satisfy Mrs. Peterson, who handed Emmy back after a few more minutes of baby talk. "You three enjoy the fair now," she said with a knowing smile. "And Caleb, don't be such a stranger in town." As they walked away, Sophia said, "She thinks Emmy is yours." Caleb nodded. Like I said, small town. People talk. Does it bother you? Sophia asked, watching his face carefully. No, he said simply. Does it bother you? Sophia thought about it, then shook her head. No, it doesn't. The admission surprised her. She'd been so determined to make it on her own, to never depend on a man again. Yet here she was, letting the town believe that she and Caleb were a family. And the strangest part was how right it felt. Throughout the day, they ran into more of Caleb's neighbors and acquaintances. Each time, he introduced Sophia with a quiet pride that made her heart swell. He never attempted to explain their relationship, letting people draw their own conclusions. By mid-afternoon, Emmy was fussy from the heat and excitement. They found a shady spot under a large oak tree, spreading a blanket Caleb had thought to bring. I'll get us some lemonade, Caleb said, leaving Sophia and Emmy to rest in the shade. As she waited, Sophia watched families passing by, mothers and fathers with children of various ages, all enjoying the simple pleasures of the fair. For the first time since leaving Mark, she allowed herself to imagine a future like that, a real family, a home. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice. The man watching her from across the fairground didn't see the cold calculation in his eyes as he took in her relaxed posture, the baby on her lap, the possessions scattered around her on the blanket, didn't realize that her past had finally caught up with her. Caleb returned with 3 cups of lemonade, one for each of them and a small one for Emmy with mostly ice for her to gum. His thoughtfulness made Sophia smile. What? He asked, noticing her expression. Nothing, she said. Just thank you for today, for everything. Caleb sat beside her on the blanket, closer than he might have a week ago. Been a good day, he agreed. Later, as the sun began to set, they wandered toward the Ferris wheel. Colorful lights had come on around the fairground, giving everything a magical glow. Want to ride? Caleb asked, nodding toward the wheel. Sophia hesitated, looking at Emmy, who was drowsy in her arms. I can hold her, offered a voice behind them. They turned to see Mrs. Peterson. You two go on. Have some time to yourselves. I'll be right here. Sophia exchanged a glance with Caleb, who shrugged slightly, leaving the decision to her. After a moment, she handed Emmy over to the older woman. We won't be long, she promised. The Ferris wheel moved slowly, lifting them above the fairground. At the top, it paused, giving them a view of the entire town of Willow Creek, bathed in the golden light of sunset. Beautiful, Sophia breathed. Yes, Caleb agreed, though when she turned, she found him looking at her, not the view. Her heart skipped a beat. The moment felt heavy with possibility. They were so close in the small car of the Ferris wheel that she could feel the warmth of his arm against hers. All he would have to do is turn slightly, lean in, but the wheel started moving again, the moment slipping away as they descended back to earth. On the drive home, Emmy fell asleep in her car seat. Sophia found herself fighting sleep too, her head nodding against the window of Caleb's truck. Been a long day, Caleb observed, his voice soft in the darkness of the cab. A good day, Sophia corrected, smiling sleepily at him. Back at the farm, Caleb carried the sleeping Emmy to the barn room, while Sophia gathered their things from the truck. When she entered the room, she found him standing over the makeshift crib, watching Emmy sleep. She didn't even wake up when I changed her, he whispered. Sophia moved to stand beside him, both of them looking down at the peaceful baby. She trusts you, she said simply. When Caleb turned to her, his eyes were intense, filled with an emotion Sophia both recognized and feared. Sophia, he began, his voice rough. It's late, she interrupted, suddenly afraid of what he might say, afraid of how much she wanted him to say it. We should both get some sleep. Disappointment flickered in his eyes, but he nodded. Right. Sleep? Well, at the door he paused. Sophia? Yes? I'm glad you stayed. The simple statement wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. Me too, she whispered. After he left, Sophia sat on the edge of the cot, her emotions in turmoil. She was falling for Caleb Morgan. his quiet strength, his gentle hands, the way he looked at Emmy as if she were the most precious thing in the world. But the memory of Mark's betrayal was still fresh, the wound still tender. And there was so much Caleb didn't know about her situation, about the risk she posed to him simply by staying. If Mark found her, Sophia shook her head, refusing to let fear spoil the perfect day they'd had. Mark had no way of knowing where she was. She and Emmy were safe here with Caleb. For the first time in months, Sophia fell asleep without worry, her dreams filled with Ferris wheels and Caleb's almost kiss. She couldn't have known that 20 miles away, in the only motel in Willow Creek, Mark Alvarez was checking in for the night. Sunday morning broke with the promise of another beautiful day. Sophia woke to find a note slipped under her door. Gone to check the North Field, back for breakfast. See. She smiled at his neat handwriting, at how he always let her know where he was. Mark had never bothered with such considerations, coming and going as he pleased without explanation. The comparison made her frown. She needed to stop measuring Caleb against Mark. They were nothing alike. And what was growing between her and Caleb deserved to be judged on its own merits. After feeding and dressing Emmy, Sophia walked to the farmhouse. She decided to surprise Caleb with a special breakfast, pancakes with fresh berries from the bushes at the edge of the garden. She was at the stove when she heard his truck pull up. A moment later, the kitchen door opened, and Caleb appeared, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "Something smells good," he said, hanging his hat on the hook by the door. "Breakfast is almost ready," Sophia replied, trying to ignore the flutter. In her stomach at his smile. "Emmy's in her high chair in the living room if you want to say good morning." Caleb disappeared into the living room, and Sophia heard Emmy's delighted squeal followed by Caleb's low chuckle. The sounds of their interaction made her feel warm inside, as if the final pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. They ate breakfast together, the conversation easy and comfortable. Afterward, as Sophia washed the dishes, Caleb leaned against the counter beside her. "Thought we might go for a picnic today," he said. "There's a nice spot by the creek, not too far." Sophia smiled. "That sounds perfect." They packed a simple lunch and loaded Emmy into Caleb's truck. The spot he'd mentioned was a small clearing beside Willow Creek itself, the water gurgling pleasantly over smooth stones. A large willow tree provided shade, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. "It's beautiful," Sophia said, helping Caleb spread the blanket. "Used to come here as a kid," Caleb told her. "My dad taught me to fish right there." He pointed to a wider part of the creek. Sophia set Emmy on the blanket with some toys while Caleb unpacked their lunch. They ate sandwiches and fruit, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia told him about growing up in the city, about her dreams of becoming a teacher before life took her in a different direction. Caleb shared stories of his childhood on the farm, of the legacy his father had left him. After eating, they lay on the blanket, watching the clouds drift overhead, while Emmy napped beside them. Sophia couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so peaceful, so content. "Sophia," Caleb said suddenly, turning to face her, "there's something I need to say." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "I know you've been hurt," he began, his voice serious. "And I know you're still figuring things out, but I want you to know that I—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I care about you. And Emmy. A lot." Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. "Caleb, you don't have to say anything." He hurried on. "I just wanted you to know and to tell you that whatever you decide, whether you stay or go, I'll respect that. But I hope—" He swallowed hard. "I hope you'll stay." The raw honesty in his voice touched something deep inside Sophia. Before she could overthink it, she reached out and took his hand. "I care about you too," she whispered. Caleb's eyes lit up with hope. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned in. This time Sophia didn't retreat. Their lips met in a gentle kiss that held all the promise of new beginnings. When they broke apart, Sophia was smiling through her tears. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. To believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness was possible for her and Emmy. The afternoon passed in a golden haze of contentment. They walked along the creek, Caleb carrying Emmy on his shoulders. They skipped stones across the water and collected wildflowers. And every so often, Caleb would catch Sophia's hand or brush a kiss against her temple, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, they packed up their things and headed back to the truck. Caleb helped Sophia secure Emmy in her car seat, then came around to open the passenger door for her. Been a good day, he said, his eyes warm. The best, Sophia agreed. Back at the farm, as they pulled up to the house, Sophia noticed a car she didn't recognize parked in the drive, a sleek black sedan that looked expensive and out of place. Among the weathered farm buildings, Caleb frowned. Expecting someone? Sophia shook her head, a sense of unease creeping over her. No. They got out of the truck, Caleb reaching back to lift the still sleeping Emmy from her car seat. As they approached the house, the front door opened, and a man stepped onto the porch. Sophia's blood turned to ice. Mark. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a polished way with perfectly styled dark hair and an expensive suit. His smile was cold as his eyes moved from her to Caleb, then to Emmy in Caleb's arms. Well, well, Mark said, his voice smooth as silk but with an edge that made Sophia shiver. Isn't this cozy? Hello, Sophia. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Caleb moved slightly in front of Sophia, protective even though he didn't yet understand the threat. Who are you? He asked, his voice harder than Sophia had ever heard it. Mark's smile widened, turning predatory. I'm Mark Alvarez, he said, Emmy's father and Sophia's fiancé. Sophia gasped. Ex-fiancé, she corrected, finding her voice at last. We were never married, Mark, and you made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with Emmy. Mark's expression hardened. Things change, Sophia. I've come to take my daughter home, and you too, of course, if you'll be reasonable. Caleb had gone very still beside her. Sophia, he said quietly, a question in his voice. He's lying, Sophia said, her voice shaking, about wanting Emmy, about everything. Mark stepped closer, his expensive shoes incongruous on the dusty farmyard. Am I? Because I have papers that say otherwise. Custody papers. My lawyer filed them last week. Sophia felt the world tilt beneath her feet. You can't, she whispered. I can, Mark countered, and I will, unless... Unless what? Caleb demanded, his arm tightening around Emmy, who was beginning to stir. Mark's gaze shifted to him, calculating. Unless Sophia comes home, where she belongs, with me. I'll never go back to you, Sophia said, finding strength in her anger. And you'll never get Emmy. Mark's facade of civility slipped, revealing the coldness beneath. Don't be stupid, Sophia. Look at you, living in a barn depending on the charity of some farmer. What kind of life is that for our daughter? My lawyers will destroy you in court. Before Sophia could respond, Emmy woke fully and began to cry, confused by the tension and the unfamiliar voice. Caleb immediately turned his attention to her, soothing her with the gentle confidence that still amazed Sophia. Mark watched, his expression darkening. Give me my daughter, he demanded, stepping forward with hands outstretched. Caleb moved back, shielding Emmy with his body. The lady said no, he said, his voice quiet but firm. For a moment, Mark looked as if he might try to take Emmy by force. Then he seemed to think better of it, smoothing his expression into a cold smile. Have it your way, he said. For now. But this isn't over, Sophia. Not by a long shot. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope, tossing it onto the ground at her feet. Court date's in there. See you soon. With that, he turned and walked back to his car, the expensive engine purring to life as he drove away. Sophia felt her knees give way. If not for Caleb's arms suddenly around her waist, she might have collapsed. Come inside, he said gently, guiding her toward the house. Once in the kitchen, Caleb sat her down at the table, then placed Emmy in her high chair with a few toys to distract her. He put on a kettle for tea, his movements calm and deliberate, despite the tension in his shoulders. Finally, he sat across from Sophia, his eyes serious. Tell me everything, he said quietly. And so she did. About Mark's gradual coldness during her pregnancy, about finding evidence of his affair when Emmy was just 2 months old, about his indifference to his daughter until Sophia had decided to leave, about his threat to use his family's money and influence to take Emmy from her. "I was so scared," she finished, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know what else to do but run." Caleb listened without interrupting, his expression growing increasingly grim. When she fell silent, he reached across the table and took her hand. "You did what you had to do," he said firmly, "to protect Emmy. No one can fault you for that." "But what am I going to do now?" Sophia whispered, looking at the envelope on the table. "He'll win. He has money, lawyers, connections. He won't win," Caleb said, his voice hard with determination. "We won't let him." Sophia's heart clenched at the "we." Even now, faced with the mess she'd brought to his door, Caleb was standing with her. "I should leave," she said, even as the thought tore at her heart. "Go somewhere else. He'll just keep following me." "Running won't solve this," Caleb said gently. "You need to face him, fight him, and you don't have to do it alone." Sophia looked up at him through her tears. "Why would you help me? You barely know me." Caleb's eyes softened. "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're a good mother. I know you're brave and kind and stronger than you think. And I know," he paused, taking a deep breath, "I know I'm falling in love with you, both of you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw and terrifying in their vulnerability. Sophia stared at him, her heart racing. It was too soon, too fast. "And yet, Caleb," she began, not knowing what she was going to say. But before she could continue, Emmy let out a happy sound, not a cry or a babble, but a distinct word: "Da." Both adults froze, turning to look at the baby. Emmy was smiling at Caleb, her tiny hands reaching for him. "Da," she said again, more insistently. Sophia's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Oh, Emmy, I'm sorry," she began, mortified that her daughter's first word was directed at a man she'd known for barely 2 weeks. But Caleb's eyes were soft, not wounded. "Don't be sorry," he said gently. "Maybe she sees something we're too scared to admit." He stood and lifted Emmy from her high chair, holding her close. The baby snuggled against him, completely content in his arms. Looking at them, Sophia felt something settle in her heart. A certainty that had been building since that first night in the barn, when Caleb had simply said, "Let me take care of you." She might not be ready to say she was in love, but she knew with sudden clarity that she was no longer running. She had found the place she was meant to stay. The only question now was whether she would be allowed to keep it. The morning after Mark's unwelcome visit, Sophia sat at Caleb's kitchen table, the custody papers spread before her. Her hands trembled as she read through the legal language, accusations of parental kidnapping, claims that she was unstable and unfit to care for Emmy, demands for full custody with only supervised visitation for Sophia. "He's lying," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. "Everything in here is a lie." Caleb, who had been making coffee, placed a mug in front of her and sat down. "Then we'll prove it," he said firmly. "But you can't do this alone, Sophia. I need a lawyer." Sophia laughed bitterly. "I can barely afford diapers, Caleb. How am I supposed to pay for a lawyer?" "I know someone," Caleb said. "Rebecca Wilson. She grew up here in Willow Creek. We went to school together. She's a family lawyer in the city now, but she still has a small office in town for local cases." Sophia shook her head. "I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering." Caleb reached across the table and took her hand. "Sophia, I meant what I said yesterday. I'm falling in love with you and Emmy. I want to help." The admission still made Sophia's heart race. She hadn't responded to his declaration last night, too overwhelmed by Mark's appearance and the custody threat. But in the quiet of the morning, with Emmy still sleeping in the barn room, she could no longer avoid her feelings. "I'm scared." "Caleb," she admitted softly, "not just of Mark and the custody case, I'm scared of what I'm feeling for you." Caleb's hand tightened around hers. "I know. After what you've been through, I understand. We can take it slow." "It's not just that." Sophia sighed. "When I look at you with Emmy, the way you care for her, how she lights up around you, it's everything I ever wanted. And that terrifies me. Because I thought I had that once before, and it turned out to be a lie. I'm not Mark, Caleb said quietly. I know you're not, Sophia replied. That's what scares me the most. Because if this is real, if you're real, then I have so much more to lose. Caleb was silent for a moment, considering her words. When Sarah died, he finally said, I thought I'd never love again. Never want to risk that kind of pain. For 5 years I've been alone in this house, just going through the motions of living. His eyes met hers, vulnerable and honest. Then you showed up on my porch in the rain, and somehow, without even trying, you brought life back to this place. Back to me. Sophia felt tears gathering in her eyes. Caleb, I'm not asking for promises, he continued. Just a chance for both of us to see where this might go. He gave her a small smile. And in the meantime, let me help you fight for Emmy. Looking into his earnest blue eyes, Sophia felt the last of her resistance crumble. Okay, she whispered. But I need to find a job, start paying my own way. I can't keep depending on your charity. It was never charity, Caleb said firmly. But I understand. And I might have an idea about that too. The elementary school in town is looking for a teacher's aide. You said you wanted to be a teacher. Once. Sophia's eyes widened. How did you know about that job? Caleb looked slightly embarrassed. Mrs. Peterson mentioned it at the fair. She's on the school board. I might have asked if there were any openings in town. You were already thinking about me staying, Sophia realized. Hoping? Caleb corrected with a small smile. That smile did something to Sophia's heart, something warm and fluttery that she hadn't felt in a very long time. Before she could overthink it, she leaned across the table and pressed her lips to his in a soft kiss. Thank you, she whispered as she pulled away. For everything. Caleb's eyes were bright when they opened. You're welcome, he said, his voice slightly husky. The moment was broken by Emmy's cry from the baby monitor Caleb had bought earlier in the week. Sophia stood, but Caleb touched her arm. Let me, he said. You finish your coffee. As he left to get Emmy, Sophia watched him go, a strange sense of peace settling over her despite the threat hanging over their heads. Whatever happened with Mark and the custody case, she wasn't alone anymore. Later that morning, they drove into town to meet with Rebecca Wilson. Her office was small but neat, with diplomas and certifications hanging on the walls. Rebecca herself was a sharp-eyed woman in her early 30s, with a no-nonsense manner that Sophia found reassuring. After hearing Sophia's story and reading through Mark's custody filing, Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. He's got money and connections, she said bluntly. And running with Emmy doesn't look good, no matter your reasons, but, she added as Sophia's face fell, we have some advantages too. Like what? Sophia asked, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Like the fact that he's shown little interest in Emmy until now, Rebecca replied. Like the evidence of his affair if we can document it. And most importantly, like the fact that you've been Emmy's primary caregiver from day one. Will that be enough? Caleb asked, his hand steady on Sophia's shoulder. Rebecca didn't sugarcoat her answer. It's going to be a fight, but I've beaten tougher opponents than Mark Alvarez. She smiled, a determined glint in her eye. Especially when they underestimate small-town lawyers. As they left Rebecca's office, Sophia felt the first stirrings of hope. She seems confident, she said as they walked down Main Street. Rebecca was always a fighter, Caleb replied. Won every debate in high school. Went to law school on a full scholarship. Mark's fancy city lawyers won't know what hit them. Sophia smiled at his faith in his childhood friend. I hope you're right. While we're in town, Caleb said, want to stop by the school, see about that job? Sophia hesitated, suddenly nervous. What if they don't hire me? They'd be fools not to, Caleb said with such conviction that Sophia had to laugh. Okay, she agreed. Let's try. The elementary school was a brick building with colorful drawings posted in the windows. The principal, Mrs. Roberts, was delighted to meet with Sophia on such short notice. After a brief interview and a look at Sophia's 2 years of college education, before she dropped out to work full-time, Mrs. Roberts offered her the position on the spot. We're desperate, she confessed with a smile. School starts in 3 weeks and our last aide took a teaching position in the city. When can you start? Sophia glanced at Caleb, who was entertaining Emmy in the hallway. What about childcare? She asked hesitantly. Bring her with you until we find a solution, Mrs. Roberts suggested. Many of our teachers have young children. We have a small daycare room next to the teacher's lounge. Relief washed over Sophia. Then I can start whenever you need me. Monday? Just to get you trained before the students arrive. Monday is perfect, Sophia agreed, hardly believing her luck. As they walked back to the truck, Sophia couldn't stop smiling. I got a job, she said, the words still surprising her. A real job, doing something I've always wanted to do. Caleb smiled at her excitement. Told you they'd be fools not to hire you. And Mrs. Roberts said I can bring Emmy, Sophia continued, bouncing the baby on her hip. Isn't that wonderful, Emmy? You're going to school with Mama. Emmy gurgled happily, reaching for Caleb as they reached the truck. Without hesitation, he took her, securing her in the car seat with practiced ease. Watching him with her daughter, Sophia felt that now familiar warmth in her chest. It was still too soon, too fast to put a name to what she was feeling. But whatever it was growing stronger every day. That evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Sophia made a decision. I think we should move out of the barn room, she said. Caleb looked surprised. You want to leave? No, Sophia clarified quickly. I mean, we should move into the house, if the offer still stands. The barn room was fine for a temporary stay, but if we're going to be here longer. She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Caleb's face broke into a wide smile. The offer definitely still stands. There's a bedroom upstairs that would be perfect for Emmy. It gets the morning sun. Sophia nodded, relieved. And I can pay rent now, with my job at the school. Caleb started to protest, but Sophia held up a hand. I need to do this, Caleb, for my own pride, if nothing else. And, she added softly, it will look better for the custody case if I have a stable home and income. Understanding dawned in Caleb's eyes. You're right, he agreed. We'll work out something fair. The next day they moved Sophia and Emmy's few belongings into the farmhouse. The bedroom Caleb had mentioned for Emmy was perfect, spacious and bright, with a window overlooking the garden. He brought up a crib from the attic, one that had belonged to him as a baby. It needs a new mattress, he said as they set it up, and probably a fresh coat of paint, but it's sturdy. Sophia ran her hand along the smooth wood, noticing the small carved initials on one side. CM. Your father made this, she asked. Caleb nodded. For me, and then I was supposed to use it for my children. The simple statement hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sophia didn't know what to say, so she simply reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. For herself, Sophia took the guest room across the hall from Emmy's. It was simply furnished with a double bed, a dresser, and a rocking chair by the window. It felt strange to have a real bedroom after weeks in the barn and months on the road before that. That night, after putting Emmy to bed in her new room, Sophia found Caleb in the kitchen making tea. House feels different, he said as he handed her a mug. Better. Less empty, Sophia suggested with a small smile. More like a home, Caleb corrected. The days that followed fell into a new routine. Sophia started her job at the school, bringing Emmy with her as Mrs. Roberts had suggested. Caleb continued his work on the farm, but made time each evening to sit with Sophia and talk about their days. They worked together to prepare for the custody hearing, gathering evidence of Mark's past indifference to Emmy, and slowly, carefully, their relationship deepened. Caleb never pushed, never assumed, always letting Sophia set the pace. But his feelings were clear in the small things, the way he'd brush her hair from her face, the gentle touch of his hand at the small of her back, the soft kisses they shared when Emmy was asleep. One evening, about a week before the hearing, Sophia found Caleb in Emmy's room, reading her a bedtime story. He hadn't heard Sophia approach, and she paused in the doorway, watching them together. Emmy was drowsy, her eyes heavy, but she was focused intently on Caleb's face as he read, one tiny hand clutching his finger. The scene made Sophia's throat tight with emotion. This was what she'd always wanted for her daughter, a father who truly loved her, who would read her stories and protect her and put her needs before his own. As if sensing her presence, Caleb looked up. His smile when he saw her was so full of affection that Sophia felt her heart might burst. "She's almost asleep," he whispered. Sophia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Caleb gently extracted his finger from Emmy's grasp and placed the sleeping baby in her crib. He joined Sophia in the hallway, closing Emmy's door partway. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her emotional state. Sophia nodded, then shook her head, tears suddenly spilling down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Caleb," she admitted. "The hearing is next week, and what if Mark wins? What if he takes her from me?" Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her close as she cried. "That's not going to happen," he said firmly. "Rebecca is building a strong case. You're a good mother, Sophia. Any judge will see that. But Mark has so much money, so many connections. And you have the truth," Caleb interrupted gently. "And you have me and Rebecca. And even Mrs. Peterson, who told me today she'd be happy to testify about what a wonderful mother you are." Sophia looked up at him in surprise. "She did?" Caleb nodded. "The whole town is behind you, Sophia. Word gets around in a place like this. Everyone knows Mark showed up making demands, and no one likes an outsider coming in and threatening one of their own." "One of their own," Sophia repeated softly. "Is that what I am now?" "If you want to be," Caleb said, his eyes serious. "This place could be your home, Sophia, for as long as you want it to be." The sincerity in his voice made fresh tears well in Sophia's eyes, but these were different, tears of hope, of possibility. She reached up and touched his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I want that," she whispered. "I want this to be our home, Emmy's and mine." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "Then it is," he said simply. That night, for the first time, Sophia didn't return to the guest room after their good-night kiss. Instead, she took Caleb's hand and led him to his bedroom, their bedroom now, and closed the door behind them. Later, lying in his arms, Sophia felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, tonight she was exactly where she belonged. The day of the custody hearing dawned bright and clear. Sophia, dressed carefully in a simple blue dress that Rebecca had suggested would look appropriate for court. Caleb wore a suit that Sophia had never seen before, slightly outdated but well kept. "My dad's," he explained when he caught her looking. "From when he used to go to church." Rebecca met them at the courthouse, her expression confident despite the three expensive-looking lawyers flanking Mark in the hallway. "Remember," she told Sophia quietly, "just tell the truth. Your story is compelling on its own. Let Mark be the one to try too hard." The courtroom was smaller than Sophia had expected, with just a few rows of seats behind the tables for the plaintiff and defendant. Mrs. Peterson was there, along with Mrs. Roberts from the school and several other townspeople Sophia recognized. Their presence gave her strength. When Mark entered with his lawyers, he looked as polished and confident as ever in his expensive suit. His eyes met Sophia's across the room, cold and calculating. Then his gaze shifted to Caleb beside her, and his lip curled slightly in disdain. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, called the court to order. The proceedings began with Mark's lead lawyer presenting their case, painting Sophia as unstable and irresponsible, accusing her of denying Mark his parental rights by fleeing with Emmy. "Mr. Alvarez simply wants what any father wants," the lawyer concluded smoothly. "The chance to be part of his daughter's life, a chance Ms. Alvarez has deliberately denied him." When it was Rebecca's turn, she approached the bench with a calm confidence that reassured Sophia. "Your Honor," she began, "my client does not dispute that she left town with her daughter, but I intend to show that she did so out of genuine fear for her child's well-being after months of neglect and indifference from Mr. Alvarez." Rebecca then called Sophia to the stand. With gentle guidance, she led Sophia through her story, the gradual change in Mark during her pregnancy, his absence during Emmy's first months, the discovery of his affair, and finally, his threat to take Emmy away using his family's money and influence. "And why did you believe he would follow through on this threat?" Rebecca asked. Sophia took a deep breath. "Because Mark always gets what he wants," she said simply. He has the money and the connections to make it happen, and he made it clear that hurting me was more important to him than Emmy's welfare. Mark's lawyer objected, claiming speculation, but the judge overruled him, instructing Sophia to continue. Mark had shown no interest in being a father, Sophia explained. He missed doctor's appointments during my pregnancy. He wasn't even present for Emmy's birth. He was at a business dinner. When she cried, he would leave the room. He never changed a diaper, never got up with her at night. Her voice broke slightly. The day I found out about his affair, I asked him why, and he said, "You're not the woman I fell in love with. All you care about is that baby." The courtroom was silent as Sophia's words hung in the air. Even Mark's expression had lost some of its confidence. Rebecca then presented evidence, text messages from Mark, cancelling plans with Sophia during her pregnancy, credit card statements showing his expenses on nights he claimed to be working late, photos on social media of him at parties when Emmy was just weeks old. Finally, Rebecca called her surprise witness, Mark's former secretary, Jennifer. Jennifer testified that Mark had openly complained about Sophia's pregnancy, calling it a complication to his plans. She confirmed his affair and most damagingly recounted a conversation she'd overheard just before Sophia left town. "Mr. Alvarez was on the phone with someone, his lawyer, I think," Jennifer said. "He said, 'I don't care about custody. I just want to teach her a lesson. No one walks out on me.'" Mark's lawyers tried to discredit Jennifer, suggesting she had been fired and was seeking revenge. But Jennifer calmly explained that she had left voluntarily after witnessing Mark's behavior and had since found a better position. By the time Mark took the stand, the mood in the courtroom had shifted. His testimony sounded rehearsed, his expressions of fatherly concern hollow after what the court had heard. When Rebecca cross-examined him, asking specific questions about Emmy's medical history, daily routine, and even her favorite toys, his inability to answer spoke volumes. "No further questions, Your Honor," Rebecca said with quiet confidence. The judge called a brief recess before announcing her decision. In the hallway, Caleb pulled Sophia close. "You did great," he whispered against her hair. "So did Rebecca." "But..." "The judge didn't say anything," Sophia fretted. "What if..." "Trust the truth," Caleb said simply. When court resumed, the judge looked directly at Sophia and Mark in turn before speaking. "Family court cases are rarely simple," she began. "Emotions run high, and it can be difficult to determine what is truly in the best interest of the child. However, in this case, the evidence is quite clear." She turned to Mark. "Mr. Alvarez, your sudden interest in your daughter, after months of documented indifference, raises serious concerns about your motives. The testimony of your former employee, as well as the evidence presented by Ms. Alvarez's counsel, suggests that your custody filing was motivated more by a desire to control Ms. Alvarez than by genuine concern for your child." Sophia felt hope rising in her chest as the judge continued. "Ms. Alvarez, while I cannot condone your decision to leave town without legal notice to the child's father, I understand the fear that motivated that decision. You have demonstrated consistent care for your daughter's well-being and have established a stable home and employment in Willow Creek." The judge straightened her papers. "Therefore, I am granting primary physical custody of Emmy Alvarez to her mother, Sophia Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez will have visitation rights to be supervised initially, with the possibility of revision after 6 months if he demonstrates genuine commitment to building a relationship with his daughter." Relief washed over Sophia in a wave so powerful she thought her knees might give way. Beside her, Caleb squeezed her hand, his own relief evident in the breath he released. Mark's face had darkened with anger. He leaned toward his lawyers, whispering furiously, but the lead lawyer shook his head slightly. As they left the courtroom, Mark caught up to Sophia in the hallway. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and angry. "I'll appeal. That's enough, Mark," Sophia interrupted, surprising herself with her steadiness. "The judge saw through you. Everyone did. You don't want Emmy. You never did. You just wanted to hurt me." Mark's expression confirmed her words. For a moment she thought he might say something more, but then Caleb stepped forward, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. "I think you should go now," Caleb said quietly. There was no threat in his words, just a calm certainty that made Mark take a step back. Mark looked between them, his gaze calculating. "So that's how it is," he said finally. "Found yourself a replacement, Sophia, a farmer to play daddy to my kid." Sophia felt Caleb tense beside her, but before he could respond, she spoke. "Caleb is twice the man you'll ever be," she said clearly. "And Emmy deserves someone who loves her, really loves her, not someone who sees her as a pawn." Something flickered in Mark's eyes, perhaps recognition of the truth in her words, or perhaps just the realization that he had lost. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. Sophia watched him go, feeling not anger or hatred, but a profound sense of relief. It wasn't completely over. There would still be supervised visitations, to arrange legal details to work out, but the worst was behind them. "Emmy was safe, you okay?" Caleb asked softly. Sophia nodded, turning to him with a smile that felt lighter than any she'd managed in months. "I am," she said, and meant it. "Let's go home." Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Peterson and the other townspeople who had come to support them were waiting. There were hugs and congratulations, offers of home-cooked meals and babysitting. Sophia was overwhelmed by the show of support from people who, just weeks ago, had been strangers. "Told you the town was behind you," Caleb said as they finally made their way to his truck, where Rebecca was waiting with Emmy, who had been cared for by a court volunteer during the hearing. Emmy squealed with delight at the sight of her mother, reaching out her arms. Sophia took her, holding her close, breathing in the sweet baby scent of her hair. "We did it, baby girl," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Rebecca smiled at the reunion. "You were wonderful in there, Sophia," she said. "Your honesty was your best weapon." "I couldn't have done it without you," Sophia replied gratefully. "How can I ever thank you?" "By being happy," Rebecca said simply. "Both of you." Her knowing glance between Sophia and Caleb made Sophia blush slightly as they drove. Back to the farm, Sophia felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The fear she'd been carrying for so long was gone, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. Caleb reached across the seat and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Proud of you," he said quietly. Sophia smiled, squeezing his hand in. "Return." "We did it together," she replied, "just like you promised." That evening, after Emmy was asleep in her crib in her room, in their home, Sophia and Caleb sat on the porch swing, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. "What happens now?" Caleb asked, his arm around her shoulders. Sophia leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Now we live," she said simply, "day by day, building a life here." She looked up at him. "If that's still what you want." Caleb's eyes were serious as they met hers. "It's all I want," he said, "you and Emmy here with me." He hesitated, then added, "But there's something I need to ask you." Sophia's heart began to race. "What is it?" "It might be too soon," Caleb warned, "and if it is, just tell me. We can wait. I'd wait forever if that's what you needed." "Caleb," Sophia said, smiling now, "just ask." He took a deep breath. "I know we haven't known each other long, and I know you're just starting to feel safe again, but I love you, Sophia, and I love Emmy like she was my own." His eyes held hers, vulnerable and hopeful all at once. "I want us to be a family, a real family. Would you consider, someday, marrying me?" Sophia's breath caught in her throat. A part of her wanted to say it was too soon, that they should wait, be sensible, but her heart knew the truth that her head was still catching up to. She had fallen in love with Caleb Morgan, with his quiet strength and gentle hands, and the way he looked at Emmy as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy filling her eyes. "Not someday, soon." Caleb's face broke into the most beautiful smile Sophia had ever seen. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache in the best possible way. "I love you," she said against his lips, the words she'd been afraid to say now flowing freely. "I love you, Caleb Morgan." As they held each other under the star-filled sky, Sophia thought about the long, winding road that had led her to this porch This man, this moment. All the fear and pain and uncertainty had brought her here, to a place where she finally felt safe. Where she finally felt home. Inside the house, as if sensing the joy of the moment, Emmy stirred in her sleep and spoke the word that had changed everything. Da. The word floated through the baby monitor on the porch, making both Sophia and Caleb smile. She was right all along, Sophia said softly. Smart kid, Caleb agreed, pressing a kiss to Sophia's temple. Sophia closed her eyes, savoring the moment. After so much struggle, so much fear, they had found their way to each other. To this. To love. And for the first time in a very long time, Sophia wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring, because whatever came next, they would face it together. As a family. 3 months had passed since the custody hearing, and life at Willow Creek Farm had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sophia's job at the elementary school was going well. She loved working with the children, and the principal had already hinted at the possibility of the school sponsoring her to finish her teaching degree. Emmy was thriving, growing more active and vocal each day. She had added several words to her vocabulary beyond da, though that remained her favorite, especially when Caleb came in from working in the fields, and Sophia and Caleb were planning their wedding, a simple ceremony to be held in the spring, when the apple trees in the orchard would be in bloom. Sophia had never been happier. There was only one cloud on their horizon, Mark's supervised visitations with Emmy. As ordered by the court, they took place twice a month at a family services center in the city. Sophia dreaded these days, not because she begrudged Emmy a relationship with her biological father, but because Mark seemed to view the visits as an obligation rather than an opportunity. He often arrived late, sometimes cancelled at the last minute, and rarely engaged with Emmy in any meaningful way. The social worker who supervised the visits had noted in her reports that Mark appeared more interested in questioning Sophia about her life than in bonding with his daughter. I don't understand why he even bothers, Sophia said to Caleb one evening, after a particularly tense visitation. He doesn't really want to be Emmy's father. He's just doing this to keep control over me somehow. Caleb, who was helping Emmy build a tower of blocks on the living room floor, looked up with concern in his eyes. Did he say something to upset you today? Sophia sighed, sitting on the couch behind them. He kept asking about our wedding plans. Wanted to know if we'd set a date yet. Then he made some comment about how I was trading up from a businessman to a farmer. She rolled her eyes. As if your worth as a person has anything to do with your job. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained calm. He's trying to get under your skin. Don't let him. I know, Sophia agreed. It's just exhausting, having to deal with him. Only 3 more months of supervised visits, Caleb reminded her. Then the judge will reevaluate. If he keeps missing visits and showing little interest, Rebecca thinks we might be able to reduce the frequency. Sophia nodded, trying to focus on that hope. You're right. And it's worth it for Emmy's sake. She deserves to know her biological father, even if he's... She trailed off, mindful of little ears that were increasingly understanding more words. Caleb seemed to read her thoughts, smiling as he ruffled Emmy's dark curls. The baby giggled, knocking over the tower of blocks with delight. Again, she demanded, one of her newest words. Again it is, Caleb agreed, beginning to stack the blocks. Once more. Watching them together, Sophia felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was what a father should be, patient, loving, present. Caleb had stepped into the role so naturally, as if he'd been waiting all his life to be Emmy's dad. Later that night, after Emmy was asleep, Sophia found Caleb in the kitchen, looking over seed catalogues for the spring planting. I've been thinking, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Caleb looked up, giving her his full attention. About what? About Emmy. About you. Sophia took a deep breath. I want you to adopt her after we're married. I want her to be yours legally, the way she already is in every way that matters. Caleb's eyes widened with surprise, then filled with such joy that Sophia felt tears prick at her own eyes. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. That's a big step. I've never been more sure of anything, Sophia said firmly. You're her father in all the ways that count, I want to make it official. Caleb reached across the table and took her hands in his. What about Mark? He'd have to give up his parental rights. Sophia nodded. I know, and that's the complicated part. But given how little interest he's shown, she squeezed Caleb's hands. I think it's worth trying. Rebecca can help us figure out the legal aspects. Sophia, Caleb said, his voice thick, with emotion. Nothing would make me prouder than to be Emmy's father. Not just in my heart, but in the eyes of the law, too. The love shining in his eyes made Sophia's heart swell. She stood and moved around the table, sitting on his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. We're going to be a real family, she whispered against his lips. The three of us. We already are, Caleb replied, before kissing her deeply. The way. Next morning, Sophia called Rebecca to discuss the possibility of Caleb adopting Emmy. The lawyer was cautiously optimistic. It's not impossible, Rebecca explained, but it would require Mark to voluntarily terminate his parental rights. Given his behavior so far, I'm not sure how willing he'll be to do that. What if we offered something in return? Sophia asked. Like waiving the back child support he never paid. That might help, Rebecca agreed. Let me look into it and get back to you. In the meantime, don't mention this to Mark yet. Let me approach his lawyer first. For the next few weeks, life continued as normal at Willow Creek Farm. December arrived, bringing with it a light dusting of snow and preparations for Emmy's first real Christmas. Sophia had few happy holiday memories from her own childhood, and she was determined to make this Christmas special for her daughter. Caleb seemed equally excited, coming home one day with a perfect pine tree strapped to the back of his truck. Together they decorated it with a mix of Caleb's family ornaments and new ones Sophia had bought in town. Emmy was fascinated by the twinkling lights, pointing and babbling excitedly. Her first real Christmas, Sophia said as they sat on the couch admiring their work, Emmy playing with a soft toy on the rug before them. First of many, Caleb promised, his arm warm around her shoulders. The next day, Rebecca called with news. They about the adoption possibility. I spoke with Mark's lawyer, she said. He wasn't immediately dismissive, which is a good sign. I suggested waiving the back child support in exchange for Mark surrendering his parental rights, but he countered with a different proposal. What does he want? Sophia asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Money, Rebecca said bluntly. A one-time payment of $50,000. Sophia gasped. That's extortion. We don't have that kind of money. I told him as much, Rebecca assured her. He's going to talk to Mark about a more reasonable figure. But Sophia, the fact that they're negotiating at all means Mark might be willing to step aside. That's significant. After hanging up, Sophia relayed the conversation to Caleb, who had been out feeding the animals. $50,000, she repeated. Still shocked by the figure. Can you believe it? He's trying to sell his own daughter. Caleb's expression darkened. That man never deserved either of you, he said quietly. But if it's money he wants, we can't afford anything close to that, Sophia said, shaking her head. Maybe not right now, Caleb agreed, but the farm had a good year. And there's some land on the north side I've been thinking of selling. It's not ideal for crops, but it would make a nice home site for someone. Sophia stared at him. Caleb, no, that land has been in your family for generations. I won't let you sell it for this. Caleb took her hands in his. Sophia, listen to me. Land is just land. You and Emmy are my family now. If selling a few acres means making us official in every way possible, it's worth it. Tears filled Sophia's eyes at his willingness to sacrifice for them. Let's wait to see what Rebecca can negotiate, she said. Maybe it won't come to that. Week later, they received Mark's final offer through Rebecca. $20,000 in exchange for terminating his parental rights and allowing Caleb to adopt Emmy. It's still a lot of money, Sophia said that night as they discussed the offer. Too much. I've spoken to the bank, Caleb replied. With the farm as collateral, we can get a loan, and I've already had interest in those north acres from a developer. Sophia bit her lip, torn between her desire for Caleb to legally adopt Emmy and her reluctance to take on such a financial burden. What if we counter-offer with $10,000? That's still a significant amount. We can try, Caleb agreed, but from what Rebecca said, I think this is as low as he'll go, and Sophia, I want this. I want to be Emmy's father in every sense of the word. Looking into his earnest blue eyes, Sophia felt her resistance crumble. Okay, she whispered. If you're sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Caleb said firmly. The next day they told Rebecca to accept Mark's offer. The process would take time, papers to file, court appearances to make, but the path forward was clear. By spring, around the time of their wedding, Caleb would legally be Emmy's father. Mark's next scheduled visitation was 2 days before Christmas. Sophia drove to the Family Services Center with a heavy heart, dreading the encounter, but determined to maintain a civil relationship for Emmy's sake, regardless of their legal arrangements. To her surprise, Mark was already there when she arrived, pacing the waiting room with uncharacteristic nervousness. He was impeccably dressed as always, but there were shadows under his eyes that Sophia hadn't noticed before. "You're early," she observed, as the social worker, Ms. Jenkins, took Emmy to the playroom where the visitation would take place. Mark nodded stiffly. "I wanted to talk to you before we go in." Sophia felt a flutter of anxiety. "About what?" Mark glanced around the waiting room, which was empty except for the receptionist. "About the adoption. Your lawyer said you've accepted my terms." "Yes," Sophia confirmed cautiously. "We're prepared to pay what you asked." Mark ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture of frustration she remembered from their time together. "It's not about the money," he said, surprising her. "Or not just about the money," Sophia frowned. "Then what is it about, Mark? Because from where I stand, you've shown very little interest in being Emmy's father. You miss visits, you barely interact with her when you are here, and now you're willing to sign away your rights for a price. So forgive me if I'm confused about your motives." Mark looked away, his jaw tight. For a moment, Sophia thought he might walk out, as he had so many times during their relationship when confronted with difficult emotions. But instead, he spoke in a low voice. "I'm not cut out for this," he said finally. "Being a father. I thought I could learn, could force myself to feel what I'm supposed to feel, but every time I see her I just feel nothing." He looked up, meeting Sophia's eyes. "That makes me a terrible person, doesn't it?" The raw honesty in his voice caught Sophia off guard. For the first time since she'd known him, Mark seemed truly vulnerable, stripped of his usual arrogance. "It doesn't make you terrible," she said slowly. "It makes you honest, at least now." Mark nodded, accepting her qualified assessment. "The farmer, Caleb. He loves her." "Yes," Sophia said without hesitation. "More than anything. He's been her father in every way that matters since the day we met." "And he treats you well?" Mark pressed, a hint of his old possessiveness creeping into his tone. Sophia straightened, meeting his gaze directly. "He treats me with respect and kindness, which is more than I can say for how you treated me toward the end." Mark had the grace to look ashamed. "I wasn't in a good place when Emmy was born," he admitted. "My father was pressuring me about the business, and I wasn't ready for a family. I handled it badly. I hurt you." "Yes, you did," Sophia agreed, not willing to let him off the hook entirely. "But that's in the past now. We've all moved on." Mark was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll sign the papers." "No money needed." Sophia stared at him in shock. "What?" "I said I'll sign them," Mark repeated. "Relinquish my parental rights. Let your farmer adopt Emmy." A ghost of his old smirk appeared. "Consider it my Christmas gift to you." Sophia was speechless, suspicion and hope warring within her. "Why?" she managed finally. "Why now? Why without the money?" Mark shrugged, looking uncomfortable with his own decision. "Maybe I'm growing up," he said. "Or maybe I just want to be done with all of this. Either way, the kid deserves better than a father who's just going through the motions." Before Sophia could respond, Ms. Jenkins appeared in the doorway. "We're ready for you, Mr. Alvarez," she said, with a professional smile. Mark nodded, then turned back to Sophia. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers after the holidays. No strings attached." "Thank you," Sophia said, still stunned by the unexpected turn of events. "Hemi will know about you when she's older. I'll make sure she knows you made the right choice for her." Something like relief flickered across Mark's face. "That's fair," he said. Then, squaring his shoulders, he followed Miss Jenkins to the playroom for what would likely be one of his last visits with Emmy. Sophia sank into a chair in the waiting room, her mind spinning with the implications of Mark's decision. Caleb wouldn't have to sell his land. They wouldn't have to take out a loan, and most importantly, Emmy would legally become Caleb's daughter. It was more than she had dared to hope for. That evening, when she told Caleb the news, he was as shocked as she had been. "Just like that?" he asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "No money? No conditions?" Sophia nodded, still processing it herself. He said Emmy deserves better than a father who's just going through the motions. I think... He finally realized he's not cut out to be a parent. Caleb shook his head in wonder. "I never thought I'd say this, but that's the most responsible thing Mark has ever done." "I know," Sophia agreed. It was like talking to a completely different person. Well, not completely different, but more self-aware at least. Caleb pulled her into his arms, his expression turning serious. "What does this mean for the adoption timeline?" "Rebecca says we can move forward as soon as Mark signs the papers," Sophia explained. "It might take a few months for everything to be finalized, but she thinks it could be done by our wedding in April." Caleb's face broke into a wide smile. "So when we say our vows, we'll already be a legal family, all three of us?" Sophia nodded, her own smile matching his. "That's the plan." Caleb lifted her off her feet in a joyful embrace, spinning her around the kitchen until she was laughing breathlessly. "This is the best Christmas present I could have asked for," he said when he finally set her down. "Better than the new work gloves I got you," Sophia teased. "Well, maybe not better," Caleb joked back, earning a playful swat on his arm. That night they tucked Emmy into bed together, as had become their custom. The little girl was already in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed lamb that was her favorite, sleeping companion. "Good night, sweet girl," Sophia said, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Night, Mama," Emmy replied, her words becoming clearer each day. She reached for Caleb. "Night, Da." "Good night, Princess," Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion as he bent to kiss her cheek. "Sleep tight." As they turned to leave, Emmy's small voice stopped them at the door. "Love you," she said clearly, the first time she had spoken those words. Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes as Caleb's hand found hers. "We love you too, baby," she said. "So much." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, with fresh snow blanketing Willow Creek Farm in pristine white. Sophia woke early, excitement bubbling through her at the thought of Emmy's first real Christmas. From the baby monitor on the nightstand came the sounds of Emmy babbling to herself, already awake and ready for the day. Beside her, Caleb stirred, his arm tightening around her waist. "Merry Christmas," he murmured against her hair. Sophia turned, in his embrace, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. "Merry Christmas sounds like someone else is awake and ready for presents," Caleb chuckled. "Can't imagine who that might be." They dressed quickly and went to get Emmy, who squealed with delight at the sight of them. "Mama Da!" she cried, bouncing in her crib. Downstairs, the Christmas tree glowed with colored lights, presents piled beneath it. Sophia had worried they'd gone overboard with gifts for Emmy, but Caleb had just smiled and said, "First Christmas as a family, it's worth celebrating." Now, as Emmy tore into her presents with more interest in the colorful paper than the gifts themselves, Sophia couldn't help but agree. The joy on her daughter's face was worth every penny they'd spent. After Emmy had opened all her gifts, new toys, books, clothes, and a tiny rocking chair that Caleb had made himself, Sophia handed Caleb a small wrapped package. "For you," she said softly. Caleb looked surprised. "I thought we agreed to focus on Emmy this year," Sophia smiled. "This is special." Curious, Caleb unwrapped the gift to find a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold band, a man's wedding ring. "I know we haven't set the exact date yet," Sophia explained as he looked at her in question, "but I wanted you to have this. It was my grandfather's, the only man in my life who was always kind and dependable, until you." Caleb ran his finger over the ring, clearly moved by the gesture. Sophia, this is... Thank you, it's perfect. There's an inscription, Sophia said, suddenly shy. Caleb tilted the ring to read the words engraved inside. You took care of us. His eyes, when they met hers, were bright with unshed tears. I always will, he promised, his voice rough with emotion. Always. He slipped the ring onto his finger, a perfect fit as Sophia had hoped. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box of his own. Great minds think alike, he said with a smile, handing it to her. Sophia opened it to find a delicate gold necklace with 3 small interlocking circles. It's beautiful, she breathed. 3 circles for the 3 of us, Caleb explained. Connected, always. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes as Caleb fastened the necklace around her neck. The metal was cool against her skin, but it quickly warmed, a tangible reminder of the bond they shared. I love you, she whispered, leaning into his embrace. And I love you, Caleb replied, both of you, more than I ever thought possible. Hemi, sensing the emotional moment, toddled over to them with arms raised. Up, she demanded. Laughing through her tears, Sophia lifted her daughter, and Caleb wrapped his arms around them both. They stood like that for a long moment. A family, in every sense of the word, united by love rather than blood. The weeks following Christmas passed in a blur of winter farm chores, wedding preparations, and legal paperwork. True to his word, Mark signed the documents relinquishing his parental rights, paving the way for Caleb's adoption of Emmy. By March, as the first hints of spring began to appear around Willow Creek Farm, the adoption was finalized in a simple court proceeding. The judge who had presided over the custody case smiled as she signed the final papers. Congratulations, Mr. Morgan, she said warmly. You are now, legally and irrevocably, Emmy's father. Caleb, dressed in his best suit, smiled so broadly, Sophia thought his face might split. Thank you, Your Honor, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion clear in his eyes. Outside the courthouse, Sophia handed Emmy to Caleb, who lifted her high in the air, making her giggle. It's official, Princess, he told her. You're stuck with me forever now. Da, Emmy responded happily, patting his cheeks with her small hands. Sophia watched them, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. The road that had led them here had been long and often painful, but every step had been worth it for this moment. Ready to go home, Mrs. Almost Morgan? Caleb asked, his eyes twinkling as he shifted Emmy to his hip and held out his hand to Sophia. Sophia took it, twining her fingers with his. More than ready, she replied. As they walked to the car, Sophia reflected on how much her life had changed in less than a year. From a desperate single mother with nowhere to turn, she had become part of something beautiful and whole. She had found not just shelter, but a home. Not just help, but love. All because one stormy night, a quiet farmer had looked at her and simply said, "Let me take care of you." The wedding took place in April as planned, beneath the apple trees in full bloom on Willow Creek Farm. Sophia wore a simple white dress, Emmy a tiny matching one with a crown of spring flowers in her dark curls. Caleb waited for them at the end of an aisle marked by mason jars filled with wildflowers, his face lighting up as Sophia walked toward him on Mrs. Peterson's arm. The entire town seemed to have turned out for the occasion. Mrs. Roberts from the school, Jim from the garage, Rebecca, looking uncharacteristically emotional as she served as Sophia's maid of honor. Even Jennifer, Mark's former secretary, had come at Sophia's invitation, a testament to the unlikely allies Sophia had found along the E. Way the ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Sophia and Caleb had written their own vows, simple promises that reflected the honest, uncomplicated love they shared. Sophia, Caleb said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. When you showed up on my porch that night, I thought I was helping you. But the truth is, you saved me. You and Emmy brought life back to this farm and to my heart. I promise to love you both every day for the rest of my life, to be the husband and father you deserve, to take care of you, always. Sophia blinked, back tears as she spoke her own vows. Caleb, you took us in when we had nowhere else to go. You showed me what real strength looks like, not in power or control, but in kindness and steady love. I promise to stand beside you through whatever life brings, to build our family on this land that you love, to let you take care of us, and to take care of you in return." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb kissed Sophia with such tenderness that several guests were seen wiping away tears. Then he bent down and scooped up Emmy, who had been watching the proceedings from Rebecca's arms, including her in their embrace. "We did it, princess," he whispered against her curls. "We're officially a family now." "Family," Emmy repeated, a new word in her growing vocabulary. The reception was held in the barn, transformed with string lights and more flowers into a rustic but elegant venue. There was dancing and cake, speeches and toasts. But the moment Sophia would remember most clearly came later, after most of the guests had gone home. She found Caleb sitting on the porch swing, Emmy asleep against his chest, despite the lingering celebration. He looked up as Sophia approached, his smile soft in the fading light. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, the new name still sounding like a beautiful song. Sophia sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Mr. Morgan," she replied with a smile of her. Owned together, they watched the sun set over Willow Creek Farm. Their farm now, their home, the foundation of the life they would build together. "Happy?" Caleb asked softly, his arm warm around her shoulders. Sophia looked up at him, at the love shining clear in his eyes, then at Emmy sleeping peacefully in his arms. Their daughter, in every way that mattered. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. And as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. Not just a shelter from the storm, but a place to put down roots, to grow, to love. Place to call home, the end.